hay fever. Christian asked me, what did I think of Brian Boru? First of all, if you don't know who Brian Boru was, he was the first dictator of Ireland. That's really what he was. The Ard Rí, the High King. Now, the High was elected by the other four kings, or five kings, how many there was in Ireland at that time, main kings of the provinces. And like Napoleon with the Holy Roman Empire, he basically crowned, he decided that he was the Ard Rí, the High King, with out of his very powerful base, a very powerful Christian base at Cashel in Munster. He was the King of Munster at that time. And now the Ard Rí was a very fantastic system, because if something went wrong, the Ard Rí was sacrificed. Ireland had a fantastic system that if the Ard Rí screwed up and lost a battle against invaders or whatever, he was expected to be killed. And he took the job knowing that. And Brian Boru wanted it both ways. He got it both ways. He became the Ard Rí without submitting to the tradition that kept ancient Gaelic Ireland so strong and free from invaders, including the Romans, I might add. And that's a myth that the Romans never invaded Ireland because there was nothing here. There was loads of reasons why they didn't invade Ireland. There was plenty here. One of them was we probably would have kicked their ass because we had such a good internal structure. This nonsense about we had hundreds of disunified kingdoms. It wasn't really the case at all. It was quite unified through Tara. In fact, the United States government, George Washington, I think it was Washington Jefferson, actually cited the ancient Irish government system out of Tara as a model for Washington DC, but you didn't know that. But anyway, he decided that he'd had enough, and with the blessing of the Pope, he marched on Dublin. Now, Dublin at that time had reversed to Dublin, and the Dublin area had reversed to paganism. In fact, their names were the thomassheridanarts in Irish. Portion would have been, the majority would have been Irish people who reverted back to paganism and were worshipping gods such as Thor, and may have even worshipped ancient Irish gods such as the Morrigan. And there is actually a fantastic archaeological discovery that was found when a hotel was being built in the Liberties, the oldest part of Dublin City, last year, where they found on a slate a carving of what looked like the god Tyr, the Norse god, next to the Morrigan. So that's probably what you had. That's probably what we had in Dublin. And when he marched on Dublin, he committed an act of genocide along the way. He killed anyone who got in his way. When he reached the city, there was a ferocious battle, I think it was in Kildare. There was plenty of Irish who fought on the side of Vikings. And because they didn't trust Brian, and quite rightly didn't trust him, because he was declared himself the king of Ireland illegally, completely illegally. And so then we got the famous Battle of Clontarf, and the Vikings were defeated. Well, the Tomar Muntir, the people of Thor, were defeated by the armies of Munster, and he had some alliances with Viking armies in Scotland on his own side. So it was very complex alliances, but basically it was the Kingdom of Munster had destroyed the last of paganism in Ireland using Brian Boru's power acquired from the overseas deals, trades with the Christian empires of Europe. So in my books, Brian Boru is a traitor. Two reasons. One, he violated the old Brehon laws of the rights of the Ard Rí, declared himself King of Ireland, High King of Ireland illegally, defeated the last pagan community, the Tomar Muntir, the people of Thor in Dublin, and basically incorporated Ireland into what would later become, basically the Carolingian Empire, the Christian Empire under Charlemagne. And it was only a matter of time when the Pope gave England to the English crown that the system had already been in place thanks to Brian Boru and his treachery. So the Brian Boru, when he was murdered by the Vikings at the end of the Battle of Clontarf, it was too late. It's a shame it didn't happen 5 years earlier. And he betrayed Ireland. He was an enemy, and who knows? It's again, what if? Who knows? What have Dublin have? I mean, it's obviously Dublin would have converted to Christianity at some point, just like Scandinavia did, but it would have held out a hell of a lot longer. And it also economically damaged the country. All the trading links between Ireland and Scandinavia and Ireland and Britain were all ultimately destroyed by Brian Boru. And it actually made the country quite economically backward and more dependent upon imports through southern ports, which he controlled. So, like all these political leaders, he was a gangster. He doesn't deserve that wonderful place in history he has. I don't know.